Hello friends, welcome to this video. In this video, I will discuss with you what is popularly known as M² measure or Modigliani measure. Now, I have just got to know that G should not be pronounced because this is an Italian name. So the best way to say is to put both as Modigliani measure. That's how I would pronounce it for the entire part of the video. Well, if you are preparing for NISM series 19B exam, which is Portfolio Manager Certification exam, you will come across various ratios such as Trenor's ratio, Jensen's alpha, Sharpe ratio, Sortino ratio, and also this particular measure, which is known as M² measure. Now, why do you need to learn this? Because this measure is one of the concept that you need to know to prepare for exam. Sometimes there are numerical questions also related to this in the exam. Now, what is this Modigliani or M² measure? So the credit for developing this goes to Modigliani and his granddaughter Leah Modigliani. Both of them developed this risk-adjusted return measure, and what it does, it compares the risk of the portfolio with the risk of the benchmark or the market, right? So for any measure where you want to see whether the fund manager has outperformed the market or not, it's good to compare the return of the fund manager, which is portfolio return, to the market return, as well as the risk of the fund manager, which is the portfolio risk, to the market risk. That is what this measure tries to does. What exactly is done here is that the adjusted risk of the portfolio is matched with the risk of the market to give you an idea about whether the portfolio has outperformed or underperformed. Now that's very important as part of the comparison. So the moment you want to look at a risk adjusted portfolio, okay, this measure will help you to understand whether there is an underperformance or outperformance compared to the market return. So we will break this up to understand this more easily. So let us start. So what was the thought or the idea behind this particular measure? First step is that risk is adjusted using the standard deviation as the measure of risk. So the measure of risk used in this model is standard deviation, or measure is standard deviation. What does this measure say? That if portfolio standard deviation is lower than the market standard deviation, that is the conceptual part, you need to increase the levering of the portfolio by borrowing at risk-free rate and investing into various um, assets, right? So that your risk increases, correct? So if you borrow at the risk-free rate, okay, and invest the borrowed fund into the portfolio, you will be able to increase the standard deviation. This increases portfolio's exposure and raises its volatility to match the market. So we'll keep on borrowing this way, right, to increase the volatility of the portfolio. If the portfolio standard deviation is higher than the market standard deviation, then you can reduce the risk by investing part of the portfolio into risk-free asset, which could be treasury bills and similar kind of assets, and this reduces the overall volatility to the level of market. So basically there are two thoughts here: levering and delevering. So when you lever, you increase the risk; when you delever, you reduce the risk, right? The portfolio is adjusted until the time the standard deviation of the portfolio matches the market standard deviation. Now, this is why this is important. This is important because unless you compare two risks, okay, it will not be possible to say which is doing better. Because if I am taking X percentage of risk and you are taking the same percentage of risk, then we can use the return of both of us to compare who is doing better. So that's what is being done here, right? Once the risks are equal, the adjusted portfolio return can be directly compared with the market return. Now, this is very, very important statement, because once you make portfolio risk equal, then you can compare the returns also. Higher the adjusted return, the portfolio is outperforming the market and doing better. lower the adjusted return, obviously portfolio is doing worse than the market. So these are the two things that have to be looked at. Let us move further and let us understand the calculation now, which will be easier once we complete the entire process. It will be easier to understand this M² measure. So let us think of a situation where the market portfolio has generated a return of 28%. Okay, treasury bill rate is 8%. The standard deviation of the portfolio is 42%, which is what we need to know, while the market portfolio has only a standard deviation of 30%. So compare 42% to 30% and you will easily realize that market market portfolio risk is less compared to the portfolio that is built, right? So 42% and 30% cannot be compared because their risk levels are different. Okay, now M2 is the risk adjusted return of portfolio which needs to be compared to the market return. So M2 will help us to compare both the returns, with the market return with the portfolio return, right? This can be achieved in two ways: one intuitively and two theoretically, following the capital market line. So we will try to learn this. So we need to remember four things again. First is that the market has generated a return of the portfolio has generated a return of how much? Portfolio has a return of 35%. So that is the first thing that we need to know, and that is what we will use for the comparison. While portfolio return being 35%, if you look at the market return is just 28%, right? So market return apparently looks to be lower than the portfolio return, but when it comes to risk, okay, market risk that we can see here is 30%, okay, which is the risk that the market has, but portfolio risk is 42%, right? So it's clear that there is not a fair play because this is significantly higher than this, right? And that is the reason this return that we see, this one, 28%, is lower than this 35%. So we'll have to match both of them, and that is what we'll do as we go ahead, right? So now look at the comparison. Excess return generated by portfolio is very simple, 29%. Why 29%? Because 6% is risk-free return. And to do that, the portfolio has a standard deviation of 42%, which means this 29% return is generated with a standard deviation of 42%. Now market has a standard deviation only of 30%. So what do? The M2 measure will help us calculate this. So 29, which is the return of excess return of the market, multiplied by 30 upon 42 gives us 20.71% as the value, and we need to add back that 6% risk-free rate here, right? So once we add back that 6% risk-free rate, okay, what we will get is 20.71. So what do? We compare it now. To this, we add back the risk-free rate into the M2 measures. That is what I did in the previous slide. So what is the return? 26.71. Now this 26.71 risk-adjusted return of portfolio is lower compared to 28% return of the market. So effectively what happens is you can see that portfolio is underperforming by 1.29%. That is the problem here, because the portfolio return is 1.29% less than the market return, and that's what is M² or Modigliani measure trying to tell us. So if this number was more than 28%, there would have been an overperformance, but this is an underperformance. If you want, you can also use this formula, which is probably slightly easier. So what you do here is M² is equal to risk-free rate plus standard deviation of portfolio upon standard deviation of market. This is just an adjustment to Sharpe ratio. Okay, Sharpe ratio has been adjusted with the standard deviation value here, right, into return of portfolio minus risk-free return. So if you use these four variables, you will be able to get the similar outcome. This is the alternative step. So idea behind creating this video was just to let you know that this is a very simple step to arrive at M² measure, and you can manually work on this at home. But remember four things that we discussed. Risk adjusted return of the portfolio has to be calculated. and then it has to be compared with the standard deviation of portfolio and the market to arrive at whether the portfolio has outperformed or not. Thank you for your valuable time, and I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please do subscribe to the channel and like this video.